visibility, stimulation, and excitement. Choosing to be boring on purpose feels almost rebellious. Everything around you is designed to pull your attention outward, to make you feel that if you are not interesting, impressive, or entertaining, you are falling behind. Social media celebrates intensity, hustle culture glorifies exhaustion, and modern life quietly teaches you that being calm, consistent, and low drama is a weakness. As a result, many people live in a constant state of urgency, chasing novelty, reacting to noise, and mistaking busyness for progress. But beneath this cultural pressure lies a truth that few people are willing to accept. Most extraordinary results are built through behaviors that look boring from the outside. Repetition, routine, patience, and restraint do not generate applause, but they generate momentum. Being boring on purpose does not mean lacking ambition or passion. It means refusing to let your energy be hijacked by distraction, comparison, and unnecessary chaos. It is the deliberate choice to prioritize what works over what looks impressive. When you stop trying to constantly stimulate yourself and others, your nervous system begins to settle. Your attention sharpens. Your decisions become less reactive and more strategic. Instead of living in peaks and crashes, you enter a steady rhythm where progress compounds quietly. This steadiness is often misunderstood because it lacks drama. There are no constant breakthroughs, no emotional highs to broadcast, no visible struggle that earns validation. But this is precisely what makes it powerful. When you are boring on purpose, you stop wasting energy proving yourself and start investing it in building yourself. You disengage from the need to be seen and redirect that energy toward consistency. Over time, this creates a psychological advantage. While others are constantly resetting after burnout, distraction, or emotional overwhelm, you are still moving forward, slowly, predictably, and relentlessly. Your habits become your edge. Your routines become your armor. You no longer rely on motivation or inspiration because your system carries you forward even on unremarkable days. This approach feels uncomfortable at first because it goes against deeply ingrained beliefs about success and fulfillment. You may worry that you are missing out, falling behind, or becoming invisible. But invisibility, when chosen intentionally, becomes a form of freedom. When fewer people are watching, fewer people are influencing your direction. You gain space to think, to plan, and to act without constant interference. Being boring on purpose removes unnecessary friction from your life. It strips away the emotional volatility that keeps people stuck in cycles of excitement and disappointment. What replaces it is something far more potent: control. Control over your time, your attention, and your energy. This is the foundation of being unstoppable, not because you are louder or faster than others, but because you are harder to derail. When chaos no longer dictates your pace and stimulation no longer dictates your choices, progress becomes inevitable. This is where the art begins. Not in doing more, but in doing less with intention, trusting that the quiet path, though overlooked, is the one that leads furthest. The real power of being boring on purpose reveals itself in how it reshapes your relationship with discipline. Most people rely on emotional spikes to fuel action. They wait to feel motivated, inspired, or pressured before they move. This creates a fragile system where progress depends on mood and circumstance. When the excitement fades or life becomes uncomfortable, momentum collapses. Choosing boredom disrupts this cycle. You begin designing your life around predictability rather than intensity. Your routines stop being exciting, but they become reliable. This reliability reduces decision fatigue and emotional negotiation. You no longer ask yourself whether you feel like doing the work, The work simply exists as part of the day. Over time, this trains your brain to associate progress with normalcy rather than struggle. The task loses its emotional charge, which paradoxically makes it easier to sustain. While others are constantly restarting, you are quietly accumulating hours, repetitions, and skills. This accumulation compounds in ways that are invisible at first. There is no dramatic moment when everything changes. Instead, one day you look back and realize that what once felt difficult is now automatic. This is the advantage boredom provides. It removes friction from effort. When actions become mundane, they stop draining your willpower. You conserve mental energy for adaptation and problem solving instead of self-persuasion. This also protects you from burnout, because burnout thrives on emotional extremes. High intensity without recovery leads to collapse. Boredom creates a steady middle ground where energy is preserved. You work at a pace you can sustain, not one that impresses others. This makes your progress quieter but far more durable. You become someone who can keep going when enthusiasm disappears, which is when most people quit. In this state, discipline is no longer something you summon, it is something you inhabit. The absence of drama becomes your advantage. There is no inner battle before action, no constant reevaluation of commitment. You simply show up, execute, and move on. This is not glamorous, but it is effective. Over months and years, this approach builds an identity rooted in reliability. You begin to trust yourself, not because you feel strong, but because your behavior is consistent. That trust reinforces the system, making it even harder to break. This is how boredom turns into strength, by transforming discipline from a struggle into a background process that quietly drives you forward. Also changes how you respond to distraction, comparison, and external pressure. When your life is structured around stimulation, any interruption feels irresistible. Every notification, opportunity, or emotional impulse competes for your attention. But when you intentionally simplify your routines and expectations, distractions lose their power. You stop needing constant novelty because your sense of progress no longer depends on excitement. This creates a psychological boundary between what is urgent and what is important. You become less reactive, not because you are suppressing desire, but because your nervous system is no longer conditioned to chase every spike of stimulation. Comparison, in particular, begins to fade. When your goals are tied to consistency rather than visibility, other people's highlight reels stop triggering insecurity. You realize that most visible success is noisy and intermittent, while real progress is quiet and cumulative. This understanding allows you to detach from the pressure to constantly optimize, upgrade, or reinvent yourself. Instead of searching for the next breakthrough, you commit to the next repetition. This commitment stabilizes your identity. You are no longer defined by performance peaks, but by reliability over time. As a result, setbacks feel less catastrophic. Missing a day or failing at a task does not shatter your self-image, because your system is designed for recovery, not perfection. You simply return to the routine. This emotional resilience is one of the most underestimated benefits of boredom. When your life lacks constant emotional highs, it also lacks devastating lows. You operate from a baseline that is calm, focused, and grounded. From this baseline, you can respond to challenges with clarity instead of panic. Over time, this makes you harder to manipulate, distract, or derail. You are no longer pulled off course by trends, opinions, or fleeting impulses. Your direction becomes internal rather than reactive. This is why boring people, when intentional, often outlast brilliant but inconsistent ones. They are not chasing the feeling of progress, they are building the reality of it. Their advantage is not speed or intensity, but stability. While others are constantly adjusting to noise, they continue forward, step by step. This steadiness compounds into confidence, not the loud kind, but the quiet certainty that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself. When you stop seeking stimulation to validate your effort, you gain freedom from external influence. That freedom allows you to move with patience, and patience over time becomes an unstoppable force. The deeper effect of being boring on purpose is how it reshapes your identity and self-respect. When you stop performing for attention and start living according to systems, you no longer measure your worth by how you feel stimulated or admired. Your sense of self becomes grounded in follow-through. Each time you do what you said you would do, without excitement, without recognition, you reinforce an internal contract with yourself. This contract is powerful because it builds credibility where it matters most, internally. Many people struggle with self-doubt not because they lack ability, but because their behavior is inconsistent. Boredom solves this by making consistency the default. When your life is intentionally uneventful in key areas, there is less room for self-betrayal. You are not constantly renegotiating your standards or chasing emotional justification. You simply act. Over time, this creates a deep sense of calm confidence. You know who you are because your behavior is predictable to you. This predictability is often mistaken for stagnation, but it is actually stability. From a stable base, growth becomes safer and more sustainable. You can take calculated risks because your foundation is solid. Another important shift is how boredom protects your attention. Attention is your most valuable resource, yet most people spend it impulsively. By reducing unnecessary stimulation, you reclaim mental bandwidth. This allows for deeper thinking, long-term planning, and reflection, things that are impossible in a constantly reactive state. Your mind becomes quieter, not empty, but ordered. In this space, insight emerges naturally. You begin to see patterns, anticipate obstacles, and make decisions with foresight rather than impulse. This mental clarity compounds alongside your habits. While others are overwhelmed by choice and noise, you operate with simplicity and focus. This makes your actions more precise and effective. You are no longer scattered, you move deliberately. Boredom, in this sense, is not the absence of engagement, it is the absence of unnecessary friction. It removes the emotional turbulence that drains energy and clouds judgment. As a result, you become more difficult to shake. External chaos has less impact because your internal world is stable. This stability is rare in a culture that thrives on stimulation. It quietly separates those who drift from those who build. When you choose boredom intentionally, you choose mastery over your environment rather than submission to it. You stop reacting and start steering. That shift, though subtle, changes everything. Being boring on purpose ultimately makes you unstoppable because it aligns your behavior with time instead of emotion. Time rewards what is repeated, not what is intense. When your days are structured around simple, predictable actions, you place yourself on the side of inevitability. Progress stops feeling like something you chase and starts feeling like something that unfolds. You are no longer dependent on bursts of motivation or moments of clarity. Your system carries you forward even when nothing feels exciting. This is where true power lives, not in constant effort, but in sustained direction. As months pass, the results of your boring choices begin to surface. Skills sharpen, confidence deepens, opportunities appear, often unexpectedly, because consistency creates visibility at the right moments, even if you were invisible for a long time. By the time others notice, the foundation is already built. What once seemed uneventful reveals itself as preparation. The discipline you practiced in silence becomes your leverage. The patience you developed becomes your advantage. You realize that boredom was never the absence of growth. It was the condition that allowed growth to compound without interruption. At this stage, external validation matters less because your sense of momentum is internal. You trust your process. You understand that excitement is optional, but direction is essential. This understanding frees you from the anxiety of constantly assessing whether you are doing enough or moving fast enough. You are moving at a pace that lasts. Being unstoppable does not mean being relentless or extreme. It means being unbreakable by distraction, burnout, or emotional volatility. When life becomes chaotic, your boring systems hold. When motivation disappears, your routines remain. When others stall, you continue, quietly, consistently, without drama. This is the art of being boring on purpose. It is not a compromise, it is a strategy that trades short-term stimulation for long-term strength and fleeting excitement for enduring progress. And once you experience the freedom and control that come from this way of living, you stop wishing your life were more exciting. You realize that excitement fades, but stability compounds. That's why those who master boredom don't just move forward, they last long enough to win.